Hello and welcome back to Read Becca. Today I wanted to talk about two books that have kind of similarities, similar vibes that I read recently, and those are two Japanese language translated psychological thrillers by women authors. I've got Real World by Natsuo Kirino and translated by Phillip Gabriel, and I've got Fish Swimming in Dappled Sunlight by Riku Onda and translated by Allison. So I thought these were both very good interior stories where you're really inside multiple characters over the course of these narratives. And that's, why they're psychological, but in very different fashion from a Western thriller where stakes are ever increasing and the tension is just so high. There's tension here, but it's subtle. It's all about a tautness below the surface rather than just having twists and turns. There are certain twists and turns, but they're not the same kind of thing that you get in most modern thrillers, I would say. So starting with Real World, this one is interesting because it has a really wide cast. It's got 5 characters who we get perspective from. So we are seeing them process through this really wild situation that they're in and react really differently. And I think the characterization there is kind of the key element. There's not a ton I can spoil about this because it is so character focused, so character driven, and not about twists and turns that I don't think I'm going to spoil anything to do with this. Most of the spoilery stuff would be at the very, very end when things change for ways that will never be the same, basically. So in terms of the actual plot of this and who we're following, we start knowing that there's been a murder. So we're starting with this boy Worm who has killed his mother, and he's on the run in hiding because of that. And we very, very immediately find out that he has stolen his neighbor girl's bike and her cell phone. And so that's the connecting, like the key element that draws all these characters together, is that with this bike and phone, he contacts his neighbor girl whose bike he stole, as well as some of her friends, some who she goes to cram school with, others she just knows as friends, but they're all very different and they weren't previously that close. And so they're brought together and connected by this thing happening and them each being in contact with this boy who is obviously a murderer. They know he is a murderer. So it's really interesting to see how each of them reacts to that and how over the course of the story, retaining him on the run is basically something they battle with internally. Should they be helping him? Should they be reporting him to the police? And so that is the main tension really here. And the fact that each of them reacts so differently and part of their character causes them to react so differently. So we have very, very different types of girls. And I think that is a key feminist element to this, where we have a teenage girl who's just utterly boy crazy. We have another who is this very, very average and unremarkable girl, I think is our kind of main character as the neighbor girl. And we have others who just have completely different personalities. The overachiever who her whole life has been pressured to do everything right and achieve in school. And so that's everything that her life has revolved around is her schoolwork and getting the right job in the future. And so now they're on the cusp of adulthood and kind of facing what's going to happen in their lives in the future while they're dealing with this just crazy situation with this neighbor boy who has committed a murder. One of them finds being in contact with him really alluring and is kind of intrigued by this situation that she knows a murderer and kind of wants to brag about it, but can't obviously, and is willing to take greater and greater risks to do with this situation. So each of them has their own boundaries and they're very constantly pushing each other's boundaries over the course of this story. This element of the characters being so distinct and each having just completely baked in intrinsic different characterization was so good without being a caricature. Like everything about their persona is completely different. And I felt that was a really feminist move to make them not be one brand of woman or make womanliness a certain way. They are so distinct and what they want out of life and where they're going or their uncertainty about their futures is really, really well done. I did, ironically, keep thinking back to, in my youth, and I'm gonna date myself here, there was this great Flash comic show that called Strong Bad, or Homestar Runner, that had like a little aside comic to it called The Teen Girl Squad. And that likewise had 4 girls, and they were very much caricatures. So they're really unique. They each had like the distinguishing element of who they were. And like it kept hearkening me back to that these are similar in that they're each so unique. They have a very distinguishing element of who they are, but they don't feel like that kind of fake caricature. So I thought this was just wonderful characterization and getting inside the heads of these 5 people as they're going through this wild scenario without it being so ramped up and crazy. It in moments gets crazy, but they're still human beings and they're still interacting as if nothing has happened for the most part. Like they're still not processing the fact that this murder has happened and not fully understanding it. So this wasn't a perfect book. I didn't love everything about it, and I did feel like there could have been a little bit more to the plot and the wrap up. But overall, I loved being in these characters' heads as they're working through all of this. So I think that was just really the strong point of this book, and I really enjoyed it. Then in Fish Swimming in Dappled Sunlight, really this should be called Ducks Paddling Below the Surface, I think, because there's that like idiom, axiom, whatever it is, about the duck, how they're placid above the surface and they're paddling furiously below. This is like that in their internal, because we have 2 characters. We're alternating between their perspectives, and at the very beginning, alternating the first 2 chapters, we learn that they're a couple who are breaking up. They're kind of packing up their apartment, it seems. And each of them thinks the other surely must have killed this man, a man who was a hiking guide for them on a hike that they've done. So what is going on? Why does neither of them know that the other, or why does neither of them know that they killed the man if one of them did it, right? So that's an interesting way to start it. And as I said, the paddling below the surface is that they're constantly churning in their heads about what do they remember? Is their memory reliable? Are they just building suspicions out of thin air? Or are they actually reading into things properly and this thing that the other did was really suspicious? And so they're constantly thinking through over and over again the things the person is telling them now or is doing right now in the present, but then also connecting back to what happened in this hike that they went on. And so it's very interesting to get that interior view of both of the perspectives as they are thinking through this, just gears turning constantly. And then they're jumping back to past. So this hike, I don't think it's a spoiler to say, but throughout we learn that it happened a year ago, basically. And so why has this taken them so long? Why is a year passed and neither of them figured out who did it? It's really clear that even though they're saying they have to break up, they still care for each other a lot. And the tension is there, though, because they don't entirely trust that the other is telling them the whole story. And as they're thinking through all these doubts, other things from their past are coming up. I mean, I think this is very, like, tropey or common in these types of thrillers where them digging uncover something that was buried from very far in the past. And so this kind of deep secret comes out as well. And there's no drama to it. There is, again, that sense of the tension being very low level, being sustained rather than having these big twists. So I don't want to get into a ton of spoilers about this one, but I am going to discuss spoilers. So I do want to, these things come up very early in the book, but I would say you want to go in kind of knowing nothing, because these things are just dropped in. Even though they're big elements, they're not like dropped as massive twists where, they change everything. Like These are dropped early in the story and are integral to everything that happens from there. So I'm going to jump into spoilers here. So in terms of spoilers from the beginning of the book, nothing to do with the way it wraps up at the end. Very early in the book, we find out that the characters Hiro and Aki are twin brother and sister. And they grew up separately because Aki was adopted out, and she grew up with an adopted family. And Hiro was raised by their single mother. So the hiking guide was their father, supposedly. So a huge part of what they're exploring is, did he suspect that he was their father? Because they went there to meet him but wanted to keep it secret. They used fake names. They didn't want to expose any of that information. So not only do they worry that he maybe realized that they were his kids, but did he realize that they were in love? And if that played into one of them actually killing him. And if one of them did, why did they do that? Did they think they needed to protect their relationship over their relationship with their father? And so there's a lot to unpack there emotionally. It seems kind of, as I pointed out, that they are in a loving relationship that has not progressed terribly romantically, but they just feel this bond and connection with each other. And now one of them, Hiro, is moving on. And that's what's been happening over this past year, is that he is, he's decided he has to, out of kind of a sense of duty to social norms, move on to have this relationship and marry a woman who is not his sister, obviously. So they've always felt pressure from the people around them about their relationship, and that it's obviously taboo. I mean, but as so often happens in digging, they uncover kind of bigger secrets about their past, and that really plays into the end. And so what I will say about the end is that we don't really get solid conclusions. There is a lot of like jumping to assumptions, or they draw conclusions from things they suspect. They play out these made up scenarios about what could have happened, and they just decide that's got to be what it was. And so that comes up quite a bit. So I didn't love that. So again, this is one that was very good in terms of the interiority of the characters and the way that it draws out understanding each of these characters' motivations and how they read the other one. And the way they play off of each other is really, really great. But in terms of actually the plotting, I don't think this was like super masterful plotting. It felt like a lot of things that, you know, I've seen done before and thrown in doesn't feel like incredibly well connected in terms of the actual mystery that we're uncovering. So again, one I enjoyed very much. I loved seeing the wheels turn in their heads as this went along. That was really great. So for both of these, I think these were 2 4-star reads in terms of psychological thrillers. They definitely gave me a lot to think about in terms of characterization and character motivations and emotionality. So I really enjoyed those. Do you have any Japanese language thrillers for me to pick up in the future? Because I would love more translated fiction recommendations. Thanks so much for watching.